which is going to be on supporting the development of the social service workforce through education and training. And my name is James Churchill. I'm the moderator for this panel. So first of all, a few technical points. If you want to activate captions, then you click on the live transcript button on the control bar at the bottom of your screen. We have Portuguese and Spanish language interpretation, and you activate those by clicking the interpretation button, and then you have to choose your language. But you must click the mute original audio button in order to hear the interpreter clearly. As we go through the seminar, on the right-hand side of the screen, you should have a chat box. If you've clicked on the chat icon, could you please put your questions in there? And can you also put any comments in there as well? They don't have to be questions alone. Now you're going to see this announcement in other languages, just briefly, so that people can see that. I won't even attempt to speak it in either Spanish or Portuguese. That would be too embarrassing. Thank you. So now we're going to have 4 speakers this morning. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end, but we're going to try and make it more conversational than perhaps the usual format for workshops. So I'm going to go straight in and ask Jakob Embacher from the European Federation of Public Service Unions to start us off, who's going to be speaking on the importance of training and lifelong learning and the importance of recognition. Jakob, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, James, and good morning to everyone. My name is Jakob Embacher. I'm wearing a black sweater because it's quite cold for May, and in the background you can see a white wall with a poster. I'm here to represent EPSU, like James said. EPSU stands for the European Federation of Public Service Unions, and we represent workers in social services, both public, private non-profit, and private for-profit. In our work, we often speak about the problems in recruiting new workers in social care, but also retention is a problem. Many workers are changing careers quite soon, which constitutes a continuous loss of skills and is a huge problem for the sustainability of the sector. And the question is, how can we tackle this? How can we make it more attractive for workers to stay in the profession for longer? And I would say that training and professional development is an important part of this solution. It is certainly not the whole solution. There are many other factors, such as working conditions and salaries, but I think training still constitutes an important part. Ideally, training can help to offer new career pathways and can be an important motivating factor for workers to stay in social services for a long time and develop their career in this sector. For this reason, it's important that training also is linked to a possibility of career progression. It's important that if you do training, that you have this idea in your head that actually this can help you advance in the sector. This is also in turn a motivating factor to participate in the training. Workers can think, okay, I'm doing this training with a certain purpose in mind. At the same time, it's also important to make it possible for workers to attend this training. Just offering a formal right to training, just offering training courses is often not enough. For instance, in childcare centers, the lack of time or poor work organization is often cited as a barrier to access to training. So, for instance, workers would say, oh, but if I go to training, no one would be there to replace me. They would feel it's actually not fair to their colleagues to go on training, because then they would just have more workload. So it's important to see to it that provisions are made for replacement to limit the additional burden for staff. So I think here the takeaway from my side would be that formal right to training is important, but not enough if the work organization is not sufficient and if the conditions are not right. Then the next point I want to mention is that it's important to not only value professional training, but also recognize and value informal learning. People who have been on the job for many years learn skills that are often not formally recognized. So we need to find a way to value and recognize this experience that workers have after many years on the job. And then I would also add that training and professional development should be available to all groups, regardless of occupational status and age. Especially in social services, there is a high share of part-time workers, oftentimes especially women. And these part-time workers must not be left out of training opportunities, and in turn also then of career development. In addition, also...
Can I just ask you though, what happens if I'm a worker and I'm not really bothered about career progression? I just want to do the job, you know, what happens there?
Yes. Yes, that's an important question also, I would say. I think career progression is certainly an important factor, important motivating factor, but not the only one. Training is also very important, especially with a view to health and safety at the workplace. And for instance, during the pandemic, during the COVID pandemic, a lack of training in proper hygiene procedures was cited often as one of the main reasons that led to the high death counts, that workers were simply not well trained in hygiene procedures. And the same goes also for musculoskeletal disorders, where you need to have proper training in how to lift right, in how to carry weights. Otherwise, this also leads to dropout, just in the sense of bodily exhaustion. And then I think my last point would be, apart from the health and safety and the training, in any case, it's always important that all care workers and assistants, also those who are sometimes called low-skilled, deserve decent salaries and working conditions. Their skills are not low skills. They fulfill essential tasks that allow our society to function. So I think this question about people who are maybe not so interested in career progression is a very important one, because it shouldn't be a necessity for you to deserve the value of your to deserve the recognition for the value of the job that you get. And yes, with that, I would like to finish my short intervention and give back the floor to you, James.
Thank you. Thank you, Jakob. Will there be an opportunity to have further questions later? I can't see anything in the chat at the moment. So now we're going to go on to our second speaker, who is Sylvain Renouvel from the European Federation of Public Service, what am I talking about? The Federation of European Social Employers. My apologies, Sylvain. I'm reading the wrong script here. So Sylvain, you have the floor.
Thank you, James. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Sylvain Nouvel. I represent, as James said, the Federation of European Social Employers. It's a recently created organization in 2017 to be the voice of the employers' organizations in social services. Social services understood as a support for persons with disabilities, elderly persons, children, and other vulnerable groups. At EU level, we work together with EPSU, we just heard about Jakob, and we try to face together the social services workforce challenges as staff shortages and training and so on. I was asked to talk today about the current training needs of the support on social care workforce. And first, I will talk about what my members replied about a short survey we made recently to ask them about their training skills and skills. First thing, we mustn't forget we have core skills as person's hygiene, on comfort, on soft skills as dealing with difficult situations, ability to work without supervision, adaptation to change, and so on. But we also face today a need of new skills. We've moved towards more person-centered services, and it asks for more different needs, skills as ability to intervene in a diverse environment. It can be home, it can be school, it can be streets, and so on. We are also face new needs about communication, coordination skills, and of course, to get these skills, people have to be trained properly. And with new skills and new training, we can see today new jobs appearing and being classified in collective agreements. It's a fact, for example, in some countries for life path assistants who help people to build their life path. So that's it for the current the current needs. And also we have to speak today about of course the pandemic. Did it change anything in the needs of skills and training? I would say first, and the employers are very thankful to the workforce for the commitment to deal with the complicated situation, for the past, but also still today. And I would say about the pandemic that it reinforced some needs and created new ones. Maybe let's distinguish the frontline support on the management and clerks. For the frontline careers, I would say new skills which was a skill need which was reinforced was how to deal with difficult situation. It was very challenging for them. They have also to manage stress and psychological problems, their own, of course, because it was stressful, and also to deal with to manage the stress and the psychological needs of the users. So it was very complicated for them. Of course, Jacob mentioned it. We need better skills and better training in safety and hygiene regulations to deal with the situation. And that's why also we made a joint statement with EPSU to prepare to new pandemics or new things like that. For the managers, new skills are crisis management. It was existing previously, but today it is of course reinforced, and we saw that all the management has had to progress in crisis management because it was a real crisis and very difficult to deal. They had also to improve their skills in remote management because they couldn't have meetings and so on. So they had to sometimes to manage with Zoom, with GoToMeeting or tools or Teams and things like that. And they had also to adapt to change as the frontline workers, and also to get new skills, or to get more money fundraising because the skills, the needs of in terms of funds were improved to face the situation. For both of them, we of course have to talk about digitalization. It was already present. Our sector is late in the development of information systems. It would have been useful to have more developed ones to face the pandemic. And today, it is more obvious that we have to progress in this topic. But more obviously, the new skills are with remote work and tools, as the one that I mentioned, to be able for the workers to work together, to work with their management, and also to work with users, because some services can be provided online when it is about follow-up of situations, and sometimes you can also use these tools with users that allows not to be in close contact with them, and maybe it also allows to have new ways of working, which can be also relevant. Maybe also that could make new jobs appear. The mediation agents, people who help users to understand and work and use the new digital tools. And that's something obvious, of course, for nursing homes when the elderly had to communicate with the family with an iPad. It was useful to have the workers explaining them how to deal with it. But this kind of task can be more professionalized, and maybe new jobs could appear to do such tasks. I will end about this needs, of course. I insist on it. We have two kinds of skills: the core needs, which we mustn't forget, and the new ones, which are more maybe fashionable in between brackets, what all the politicians talk about. But we have to train the staff on the two sides, because the core skills is all about the core job to help people to support them. I will end with two reflections. Yeah, if I have enough time, I guess so. With two reflections. One linked to the digital role that the digital new things, which highlights something important. In some organizations, we have the approach is top-down. I mean that the management decides on who the staff will be trained. I think with the digital, we know better that everybody has different skills, different needs, and then I would say for the training, especially on digital, but maybe broader on all the training, we have to think bottom up. We have to assess the needs of the users, because that's the person we work for, the staff, and to assess their own abilities on needs, and then build a training strategy. I think it's important. For the other reflection is about funding. Everybody in our survey, we saw that many providers say we don't have enough funds to train everybody, because in our sector, of course, when you are away for training, you must be replaced. So you must have funding to replace the person who is in training. So let's not miss some opportunities that the EU can provide. Today, we are in the right window. We have Erasmus Plus, which has been just been launched, the new phase. ESF Plus, it will come in the next month. And ESF Plus, it's about social cohesion, but also training of staff. And we have lots of money to use for that. And also, let's not forget the national recovery plans, which have been proposed to the Commission last week, must talk about digital skills. So our sector can also try to get some funding and some help to train the staff on the digital needs. To conclude, I would ask for everybody to think pragmatically. We have to use all the opportunities in terms of funding and tools, as also the new tools that may appear today, and we will talk about later, as micro credentials that maybe will help to build better career paths, and that will be maybe allow to reinforce attractiveness of the sector that Jakob spoke about. And in the end, our main goal that will allow us to provide better support to the supported persons. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvain. You painted an enormous picture there. Just thinking briefly about looking backwards on the COVID pandemic and all the problems that it's thrown up. I mean, if you could pick one thing, what would you say had been the greatest impact of COVID on staff training? What from your experience of your employers getting back to you, what do they say?
I think the impact is a change of mindset. Maybe something I mentioned a bit. Of course, it was difficult to train the staff, but we could see there were huge needs, and we had to be to improve our capacity to train the staff pragmatically, shortly, with maybe short-term trainings and so on. So in the emergency, we had to be more reactive and pragmatic.
Okay, there's been an interesting comment in the chat from Pep Sole from Support Girona, saying that the safety or security training, that the recognition of full rights under Article 12 of the CPRD is prompting people, and a very slow progress, I have to say, of states changing their legal frameworks to comply with the CPRD, means that you've got to have a new way of managing a responsibility and risk. And this means that individual persons with disabilities might also take on a greater degree of responsibility themselves. And Pep makes the comment that this removes what is called the guard or custody functions of the staff, keeping people safe above all else. And he's suggesting that professionals also need to have some training about this change and the fact that their role will change. Would you agree with that?
Why not? And I would say, if we think about the EU legislation, but I just talk about staff questions, but there's an obligation to take care about one's own safety and the safety of the others, all the people you work with, being workers or being supporting people. But of course, and the own responsibility concerns everybody, every human being and every citizen. So we take our own risk, and we have to try as much as we can to protect the others.
Okay, thank you for that, Sylvain. We're now going to move on to Marcela Heichmankova from Tenenet, and she's going to talk to us about digitalization and training for staff, and share with us all some absolutely whizzo schemes she's got, which she's using in her country, which seems to be working very well. Marcela, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, James. Good morning to everyone. My name is Marcela Heichmankova, and I'm representing the NGO Tenenet, which is one of the biggest Slovak NGO, providing services and counseling in the social field. Our work mainly consists of the social legal protection of children measures, but we also provide services for persons with disabilities through the supported employment. And today I would like just to introduce our approach of the digitalization of our work, our methodologies in Slovakia. First, let me introduce our background, our organizational background, because over the last 2 years, our organization has experienced great growth and development, and has gradually grown from the original 10 employees to the current 65 employees, and most of whom work directly in the field. So exactly to provide quality education and staff trainings for our employees, our colleagues, has always been a priority for us. But with this growth, it was really very, very difficult to provide our staff with adequate methodology and staff trainings like classroom-based trainings. And therefore, we started to think, have to do that. We can provide the relevant trainings and the equal access to all our colleagues. And therefore, we decided to create and develop the digital portal Socio that includes not only instructions and guidelines linked to the administration of all our running projects, but it is also an interactive platform for online methodologies for our social workers, psychologists, and special pedagogues. As former speakers and also Silvan mentioned, which is also very important, that we realize that the digitalization in our field is very, very important. So our trainings refers to educational programs taken by employers to enhance their skills and knowledge. And they were also created and developed by themselves, by our colleagues. So currently we have around 20 methodologies for our colleagues, for our staff in Socio, in our portal at disposal. And they are mainly focused on anamnesis. We have developed more anamnestic questionnaires focused on personal, family, health, social and professional development of our clients. There are more than 200 anamnestic questions and instructions for filling in. And these data are also very, very important for setting up the relevant approach to our clients. Then also we have specific methodologies included, like individual plan of child personality development, which is a methodology for preparation and creation, as well as regular evaluation and monitoring of fulfillment of set goals by social workers, psychologists, and special pedagogues. Because these methodologies were developed directly by 4 professional employers from our organization. And it was like a multidisciplinary approach of our colleagues. Then we have the individual employment action plan, for example, which is a methodology for preparation and assistance in job diagnostics, job search, client preparation for employment, finding and contacting an employer, and also help during the adaptation phase in a new job at the labor market. We have also developed family financial management methodology, which is a special financial analytical methodology developed in close cooperation with the commercial bank, Slovenská sporiteľňa, which is really like a private bank in Slovakia. And it just focused on how to avoid executions and client indebtedness through loans in banking but also in non-banking companies. There we have also the methodology linked to social housing, which is a methodology to support the independent life of a dysfunctional family. And very popular and very often used methodologies, what we offer is the individual, but as well as group trainings and methodologies for the implementation of the social legal protection of children measures in the family directly. These specifics are divided according to the problematic family member, for example, child parents, or siblings, but also according to a specific problem in the family, like addiction, divorce, behavioral disorders, psychosomatic disorders, and other social pathological manifestations, and so on. So it means that all our colleagues, employers, have a possibility to use this methodology in practice whenever they need it. And that's why we can also guarantee the same standards and professional approach and services for our target clients. So it means that our colleagues really use these skills to improve their performance directly in the field. The other approach what we have, not only this digital platform, is also like personal trainings, which are more developed through the program Erasmus+, which was already mentioned, which is a great program, also have to support the staff trainings. And for example, we have developed together with our international partners, the trainings have to support the people, the supported employment, for example, and have to work with the professionals, working directly with the disabled people. So it brings sometimes really a lot of benefits for us. For example, like what we realize that some benefits for staff, that is that they solve the problems immediately, but also they increased very well the digital skills, because sometimes, at least in our countries, is really like old-fashioned approach still, but now it started slowly to be more and more digital, which personally I am happy as well. And it's also a better cooperation, collaboration between colleagues, because all methodologies are created in a multidisciplinary teams, as I mentioned already, psychologist plus social worker plus special pedagogue, which leads to a comprehensive management of all our cases. And of course, when we are talking about some benefits for our organization, it's also what we already realized, that it's cost effective, because employees don't have to travel to undergo training or invest in special equipment and have to study materials. It's also the time effective, and it accelerates work, because all work done in an organization can be done faster when done digitally. Creating, upgrading, searching can be done faster, of course, and this helps learners just to increase the productivity, which is also for the organization some kind of benefit. It increases interactivity, as I mentioned already, and it's also highly flexible. What is a great for us when we have a lot of colleagues in the field. So yeah, this is an example, practical example or practice from Slovakia, from our organization.
Thank you, Marcella. This fantastic tool that you've developed.
Thank you.
What's been the reaction of the staff? Have you met any resistance to, what you might call IT phobic staff who say, I can't cope with computers, that sort of reaction? Have you had any of that?
Yes, of course we had, but then it's a great also support from the other colleagues who are already skilled in it. And we always give a space for our colleagues just to maybe learn peer-to-peer learning in the organization, that they can help the others and they can just explain how it works and where it's really useful to work with. So it's like also to peer-to-peer learning in our organization. And so, now at the moment, it seems that we don't have like really a big revolution against that in the organization. It's okay.
So overall, the reaction has been positive?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's positive, really, because it's always the same standards and also the same approach that they can use, and they can compare with each other during our meetings, internal meetings, so they can easily also identify some problems and solve them.
Thank you for that. Okay, now we're going to go on to our final speaker, who's Anastasia Pouliou from CEDEFOP, which is the European Centre for Development of Vocational Training. Anastasia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, James. Good morning from my side. My name is Anastasia. I have blonde hair. I'm wearing a yellow jacket. I am in my office in the sunny place of Thessaloniki, and in the background you can see a poster behind me that says promoting learning for work, because this is what we do actually at CEDEF in my agency. It's a European agency for the development of vocational training, and we are actually working in this particular area. In particular, I am an expert on qualifications and learning outcomes, and I'm also in charge of the project on micro-credentials, which I will be referring to later. So James, actually for this panel, I was asked a particular question that is related to how can vocational qualifications and be better aligned to meet the needs of the social workforce? And I think before I make an attempt to reply this question, I wanted immediately to refer to what comes into my mind as the feedback loop between education, training, and the labor market. This is a very important notion that actually refers to the interaction between the world of education and the world of work. And I think this is related to the continuous renew and review of education and training qualifications, which actually depends on this feedback loop where the intentions that are expressed by the education and training system are constantly challenged by experiences from the labor market and society. Of course, when we think about this feedback loop, what we need to have in mind is the learner. The learner is at the center of this circle and actually represents the shift towards more learner-centered policies and pedagogies. And at the same time, learning outcomes as an area tries to bridge the gap between this world of education and the labor market. Of course, at a policy level, there's always the focus on using learning outcomes, let's say, to improve the transparency of qualifications and opening up clear pathways for personal and professional development. And I think this concept actually influences a lot the social policies, and when we are referring to learners with specific challenges such as disability, childcare needs, and I think this is a particular target group that we definitely need to take into account. Now, at this stage, I would like to mention the following, that for many years, the European qualifications framework and the national qualification frameworks across Europe have helped a lot build this bridge between the world of education and the world of work. They have tried to contribute to strengthen, let's say, the trust in qualifications across the borders, across the systems, in an attempt to foster quality, transparency, and comparability between qualifications. In fact, nowadays we see that many of those qualifications have tried to broaden, let's say, their scope and include all nationally recognized qualifications, from vocational training, general education, higher education, and of course, adult education. And in recent years, we have seen that NQFs, the national frameworks, have tried to capture qualifications that are awarded outside the formal educational system, and those qualifications that are actually acquired through validation of non-formal and informal learning. This is a very important concept because we always need to think of the learning that takes place outside, the school, perhaps, in different informal settings, even in the area of work. And as I said earlier, many different European countries try to already include those qualifications that are awarded outside formal training. And we see, this number of countries particularly rising in the years 2019 and 20. For example, we have, different examples from countries like Denmark, France, the Netherlands, Austria, Poland, Slovenia, Sweden, and of course, UK, Scotland, that show these nice examples. Now, as I said earlier, the learner is always at the heart of these processes, and they are very critical as an approach because they try to clarify the scope and the orientation of qualifications in this effort to promote the learner-centered approach to education and training. Now, if we have we need to really reflect on the particular sector we discussed today, the social workforce. And I had a look yesterday, to be honest, from the data that CEDEFO produces from the online job vacancies project. And I noticed something really striking. The numbers, of course, might speak from themselves. We see that employment in this particular sector is growing and is actually projected to grow by 4.6 over the period 2018 to 2030. At the same time, 2/3 of personal care workers hold medium-level qualifications. So between 2018 and 2030, we see that there is a robust shift, of course, in demand that is expected from workers with low-level qualifications to highly qualified ones. At the same time, I had a quick look at the skills that are requested for this particular workforce. We see that the most important skills that are needed are the adaptability to change, the teamwork, working in a team, creativity, and of course, providing information and support to people. So these are, let's say, the very important skills and tasks that are needed for care workers. But most importantly is the following, that although ICT, digitalization, as Marcela mentioned earlier, remains the least important skill in this particular sector, according to our data, the demand for it has increased a lot and more than twofold as compared to 2019. And of course, this is a clear pandemic result. So we see that a real, let's say, upskilling and retraining and reskilling is needed for the particular workforce. And of course, the latest developments are always seen in light of the European countries, let's say, interest in micro-credentials. This very important notion that has appeared lately. And of course, this, let's say, concept tries to play a very important role in the European countries' efforts to upskill as a response, of course, to the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. We always talk about borderless learning, age neutral, let's say, learning. We see different European countries discussing about, this access to lifelong learning and, trying to capture all the different types of learning that takes place outside. Of course, keeping qualifications up to date, relevant, and flexible in times of accelerated digitalization due to COVID and to labor market restructuring, we see that the emergence of these new credentials is very important. It's actually the main key challenge for the coming years. But let me ask some critical questions. What exactly do we mean by micro-credentials? Is it really a new phenomenon? Is it maybe just a repackaging or a making use of higher education buzzword of something that is actually quite common in work-related training? And could it lead to fragmentations of skills development? And of course, who has to bear the burden of lifelong learning? Because it seems that nowadays there's a shift from government and employer, let's say, perspective to the employees, who are expectedly, let's say, asked to continuously reskill and upskill over the course of their careers. So at this point, yes, I wanted to tell you how CEDEFOP is planning, to work with this approach and what we see, let's say, as an emerging, let's say, topic. So CEDEFOP has actually tried to make a research on this area, because we've seen that lately this specific concept is actually dealt mostly by higher and academic education. And of course, this overlooks the potential role of micro-credentials in vocational and professional education and training. And it actually overlooks the potential role of micro-credentials outside formal education and training, notably by companies and labor market training. And for this reason, CEDEFOP has actually started a study from December 2020, and we are expected to run this study for, let's say, for the next 30 months. And the reason why we did that is the following. We try to focus on the role played by micro-credentials in supporting labor market related and employment relevant education, training, and learning. Our idea is to focus on the impact of micro-credentials on existing qualifications and recognition systems. And of course, offer insights on the characteristics of micro-credentials and the added value to the individual learners and employees. Our focus will be, let's say, on three distinct areas. The first and most important area is related to the mapping of micro-credentials in the European labor market related education and training. And we are going to ask the following critical questions. To what extent are micro-credentials used in and for labor market-related education and training? To what extent are they evolving outside formal education and training? For example, the training offered by companies and professional organizations and others. And what characterizes exactly these micro-credentials? And of course, in particular, when they are used for labor market purposes. In order to do that, CEDEFOP will have a survey, and we are actually preparing this survey just now, this month. And this survey will be distributed to all EU member states, of course, and it will be addressed to different target groups. One important target group for us is the NQF managing bodies. We will also ask this question to employer and employee associations. So we will try, to cover the different, let's say, spectrum of end users out there. And of course, our initial results will be there most probably in June 2021. We will also try to create 8 case studies with 8 selected countries in order to delve into this topic. And we will put our lenses on 2 to 4 labor market sectors. The second theme we will try to work on is related to micro-credentials and the evolving qualification systems. We cannot do it otherwise if we do not ask the following questions. How are micro-credentials linked to and integrated in the overall qualifications and credential system? What are their objectives? And of course, what is the impact on the overall balance of qualifications and credential systems? And last but not least, our third area is related to the added value for end users. Of course, it's the learner, it's the employee out there, it's the social worker, of course. And if we don't ask particular questions, then it doesn't really make sense. So for us, it's important to reflect on for the end user to trust micro-credentials, which conditions must be met in order to ensure portability and transferability? And for individual learners to make use of micro-credentials, what support can we envisage? And how could they play a more targeted role in supporting what I said earlier, this age-neutral system for VET, namely strengthening the focus of upskilling and reskilling, James? So I think this is, let's say, our main focus at CEDEFOP level on this particular study. And we will, of course, try to support the efforts of the European Commission now to make a proposal for the Council recommendation on micro-credentials for lifelong learning and employability. We are always in a very, let's say, active dialogue with them in order to share our insights from CEDEFOP's perspective. And also, we will try to grasp and, of course, communicate the results of this first survey we are going to launch quite soon. And I will finish my sort of intervention at this moment by saying the following. Micro-credentials are part of a mixed ecosystem. Nowadays, we talk about formal qualifications, qualifications from non-formal learning. We refer to different types of credentials like digital badges, open badges. So there's a very diverse landscape out there. So we definitely have a responsibility to inform, the end users on what these micro-credentials are about, what they refer to. And of course, we all need to put our efforts to upskill them, in the best way possible.
Anastasia, thank you. That was great. I see in the Q&A that an anonymous attendee has asked a question that I was going to ask. So I'm really glad to see that someone else is thinking along the same lines as me. I've seen the minutes of some meetings of a higher education group who are clearly rubbing their hands with glee at the idea that they could get their hands on the micro-credential expansion, let's put it like that. And the question says, there's a huge danger that the higher education sector will grab this with both hands and claim it as their own thing, and take it away from workplace-based training and professional development for individuals. And the question says, what is CEDEFOP going to do to make sure that the European approach will also be applied in the workplace, and it won't be captured by the higher education sector and turned into yet another set of academic related activities?
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent question. Thank you, James, for that, because exactly this is the main aim of the set-up study I just referred to earlier. We also agree and we support the following, that the recent research carried out specifically on this topic focuses mostly on higher and academic education. Exactly for this reason, it overlooks the potential role of micro-credentials for vocational and professional education and training. For this reason, our study and our survey will directly, try to touch the vet providers. We will also ask particular questions to companies, to vocational training professional, also education and training providers and different institutions, in order, as you say, not to leave, let's say, it's not a competitive issue at this moment, but not actually leave, the floor, or actually allow only to higher education to, delve into this issue. Of course, nowadays we see an increasing emergence of MOOCs, Coursera, different, let's say, higher education institutions, providing these short learning courses, but we should not forget at all the other companies that are out there that provide vocational training. And this in particular is very important, because from what I also read, some statistics that have been sent to us by Google, of course, it's a small scale data and small evidence, but actually show that specifically for learning, for employment, for on the work training, those employees who try, let's say, to take on board these shorter and more targeted learning courses, and those ones that try to do that actually have a lot to gain. And according to the Google statistics, we see that there has been an increase in their employability. So for sure, the landscape is much wider. It is definitely bigger than the higher education domain. And we definitely believe that what is the most important thing is quality assurance. What we see is that only when the end users acquire, or short training, which is flexible, but at the same time is certified, quality assured, ideally when this particular, let's say, part of a qualification is aligned to a national qualification framework I said earlier, then we are reassuring that there is trust in the process, there is quality, there is transparency, and this is very important for vocational training in particular.
Thank you. Can I just pick up that question with Jakob and with Sylvain, because it'd be really interesting to know what the social employers group thinks of micro-credentials, and also what does EPSU think of it? So Sylvain, would you like to go first?
Yes, okay, thanks. In the study, if I have a little survey I mentioned previously about our members' opinion about training, we asked the questions about their interest in micro-credentials, new forthcoming dispositive, and many of them told us, yes, indeed, that should be interesting to work on it and to use it in order to create new forms of training of staff, more short-term, and that will allow to reinforce career paths, opportunities of work, and also in the long term, also to improve the attractiveness of the sector, where, as Jakob said, training is one of the interesting aspects of it. Not the only one, but one of them. And about the question I saw in the Q&A box, we would be, I think, in favor of working with EPSU on a paper and so on, while the process is ongoing, to give our opinion on micro-credentials for social workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvain. Jakob, could you answer the same question for us and give the EPSU point of view on micro-credentials?
Unfortunately, I have to admit that we really haven't discussed it with our members, so I just simply cannot really say from our side, from a member side, what the topic would be. But I mean, I agree with Sylvain. It would be interesting to work on that, to maybe do a similar survey as you did. I think for us it's just important that in all those developments, the involvement of workers representatives, unions is ensured. But yes, at the moment we don't have a position on that.
Well, it's obviously something you're going to have to develop, judging by what people are saying.
Certainly, and I mean, I think working with social employers, like Sylvain said, would be a very good opportunity to do that.
Marcella, in this magnificent overarching scheme, you've got to train staff in that flexible way. Is there any space there for micro-credentials to take root?
That when I heard also this presentation from Anastasia, so I would say for sure, yes. But we didn't discuss it so far yet, so that maybe is also the time also to start this discussion at our level.
There's also a question about whether or not these micro-credentials might be linked to the idea of individual learning accounts. Anastasia, have you got any views on that? Will this happen?
Yes, actually, yes, because yesterday I was in a discussion with a very nice webinar with Commission, with OECD, UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. We were also referring to this issue. I think individual learning accounts is linked to the micro-credentials part, and actually many times I always refer to the Finnish case, Finland, because they are wonderful, their approach. They really try to adopt this more age-neutral approach and support their citizens with their more individualized portfolio and individual learning accounts. At the same time, I also wanted to mention, because I also saw a comment in the chat, that of course the European Commission has launched very recently a public consultation on the European approach to micro-credentials. CEDEFOP was also there in the discussion with the European Commission, and we all believe that actually this is an area that has just now started being discussed. It's quite diverse as a topic. What we also see is, even as a term, it's very tricky. If you ask employers, you might, or even vet providers, you might not be certainly sure that they will understand exactly what we mean with micro-credentials, what it entails, whether there is a certification or recognition process behind, whether they are quality assured. So I think that our responsibility in Europe is to make sure that we will develop standards for quality and transparency of those micro-credentials, so that the owner, is assured that what he or she will acquire will actually be recognized outside in the labor market, and of course will serve in a lifelong learning dimension. I don't think it's like, I refer to it as a policy concept, but rather touching it at its very essence. So I think we need to have a long-term planning. We will try, at least in the CEDEFOP study, to capture what the European countries are doing in particular for this topic. Ireland has already started, recognizing shorter forms of learning as micro-credentials, and they are discussing or introducing them in their national qualification framework. We know that outside Europe, New Zealand and Australia already, treat the topic of micro-credentials as building blocks for lifelong learning. So I think there's a very, nice discussion ongoing, and for sure we will try to disseminate our findings as soon as we have them from our study.
Thank you. Jakob, can I ask you, has EPSU taken a position on the individual learning account development? Are you welcoming this?
I think that would need to be part of the same discussion. I think we would need to gather information, discuss with our affiliates. But it sounds interesting for sure. But again, apologies, we don't have a position on it yet.
Sylvain, what about the employers? Are they happy with the idea of individual learning accounts?
I have no, as a EPSU, we have to ask a feedback from members. As a Frenchman, I do have also an individual learning accounts, because it exists in France since a few years, and that's something interesting to work on. I think maybe at EU level we can also help the expanding of dispositif, because it helps both sides to progress in skills, because it allows the employer and employee build together career paths with small steps, and also if an employee wants to change or to acquire new skills, even if the employer without the employer, he can do it because he has a right for money to be trained, and that's something interesting for everybody, I think.
So that's already existing as a sort of statutory system in France at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Every worker in France has an individual learning account, and he can be each year he has a new right for a few hours of training. And then he can ask to for example, concretely, if you want to be trained in languages, you ask for funding to have this training, and it is paid by contributions from everybody. Of course, it doesn't allow you to go to university for 5 years. It's just for things like micro credentials. It's short sessions. Maybe I would say in the end, it's something corresponding to 100 and 120 hours of training. But with the help of the employers, you can take your own individual account, plus with a contribution of the employer, build something bigger together in the interest of the workplace and to be trained to something new.
Thank you. Anastasia, just picking up on what Sylvain said about 120 hours for a micro-credential. You asked the question, what is a micro-credential? But didn't actually give a terribly definitive answer, maybe possibly because there isn't one yet. But would you be in agreement with Sylvain that it's something up to about 120 hours of study, or has it not been settled yet?
I would say that this has not been settled yet. This is very much dependent on the different national contexts. And what I can say is that the European Commission has actually developed a definition on what the micro-credential is, where they tried really to underline key, let's say, important notions that are related, for example, to whether the micro-credential is certified, in what way it is accumulated, recognized, whether these quality are sort of principle behind. And they are now currently working on the standards behind, the particular micro-credentials, as I said earlier. And what is very important to also mention is the stackability issue. I don't know if you understand the term, is how how impossible it is for an individual to accumulate or actually stack the particular, let's say, hours of learning, or sometimes like it's translated into ECTS, for example, in higher education, let's say, terminology. So the idea is to see how this particular short learning course, how it can be, let's say, acquired, stacked, and perhaps form part of a bigger credential, or even part of a full qualification. Because another important issue to also refer to is somehow a concern by trade unions on the following issue, because sometimes we tend to discuss on what the labor market needs or asks, and we should never lose our minds and focus on the education as a holistic aspect. And of course, we should always try to protect this owner of a micro-credentials in order to make sure that what he will be acquiring, it's, let's say, somehow recognized and somehow possible for him to transfer, to take it with him, to accumulate in order to progress, of course, to employment, but why not even to further education? But of course, there are specific conditions to be met in order for this to happen.
Thank you. There is a very important question in the chat, but I'm afraid we're running out of time. And something that we probably need to pick up later on is how can micro-credentials be made accessible for people with disabilities? And I think there's possibly a whole range of other issues lying behind that question, but it's something that the people developing the ideas around micro-credentials will need to take on board. Mm-hmm. I think we're out of time now because we need to go back to the main session, And I think if you look in the chat column, you will find that there will be a reference to the main Zoom board for us to find it back there. And so I have to somehow summarize this, somehow summarize this conversation and feed it back to the main session later on. So I will do my very best. And on behalf of everyone attending the workshop, we've had almost 50 people in here, I can see. Can I, on your behalf, thank the 4 speakers who've done a great job. And now we will go back to the main session. And thank you to the speakers, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.